Okay, here's our last set of models for this week's lab. This is the chest and abdominal plate from one of the torso models that we have. And let's take a look at some of the muscles that we can see on the anterior chest wall. This is the cut edge of the pectoralis major. Okay, and it's been removed so we can see the pectoralis minor, and so we can see the intercostal muscles. And this is the first model where we've been able to see those muscles. Okay, so you can see that there's two layers of muscle. Intercostal means between the ribs, and there's one layer that's superficial and another layer that's deep. The layer that's superficial actually begins a short distance away from where the costal cartilage is joined to the ribs. So there's actually a gap all along the costal cartilages where there's no external intercostal. But once you start, they go all the way to the vertebral column. Okay, the internal intercostals are kind of the opposite. They start at the sternum and they end a short distance away from where the ribs join to the vertebral column. Okay, and the orientation of the fascicles is opposite as well. Fortunately for us, the orientation of the external intercostal fascicles is the same as the orientation of the fascicles in the external oblique. So external, external. Okay, and then the orientation of the fascicles in the internal intercostals is the same as the orientation of the internal in oblique. Okay, so if it's external anything, the fascicles are running inferiorly toward the midline. If it's interior anything, the fascicles are running superiorly toward the midline. Okay, we can also see the external oblique here. We can see the rectus abdominis. And like we saw on that other model previously, we can see the layers of the external oblique, internal oblique, and transversus abdominis. The beautiful transversus abdominis on both sides here, and the cut edge of the diaphragm. Okay, now let's take a look at this last model. I promised you a view of the scalenes, and here it is. Okay, so this is the anterior view. Okay, and we have ribs 1 and 2 here. And here's posterior view, where you can see the cervical vertebrae. Okay, and we're getting into some thoracic vertebrae as well, where we have the ribs. Okay, now the scalenes are these three muscles here, and they have the sections are basically named for their position. We have the anterior scalene, the middle scalene, and the posterior scalene. Okay, and you can see from the way that this is represented that scalenes have their origins from the transverse processes of cervical vertebrae, and they insert on ribs 1 and 2. Okay, now because of their attachment to the ribs, they actually can elevate both of these ribs. Okay, and that's important during respiration when we're trying to take a larger inhalation. So again, like the sternocleidomastoid and the pectoralis minor, the scalenes are considered accessory respiratory muscles. Okay, so again, anterior, middle, posterior scalene, origins from the transverse processes of cervical vertebrae, insert on ribs 1 and 2, important for elevating these two ribs.